Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our latest webinar on maker approaches to using emerging technologies. Now, I'm Terrence, and I'm very excited to be the host for today's webinar. And I'm also especially excited because we have Tanya here with us. In a moment, I'll invite Tanya to introduce herself briefly. But Today is the first ever session of this new webinar series that we have, where we will be introducing different emerging technologies and how you can use it in your classroom in a maker-centric fashion. So maybe just a few words about why we kind of launched this webinar series. We noted that emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and others are getting more and more popular being used in our classrooms, but there isn't a lot of guidance out there as to how to use it in a maker-centric way. This involves emerging technologies being used to not just support learning, but also being placed within learners' hands for them to create, for them to tinker, for them to make mistakes around, similar to how maker education in a traditional classroom setting might look like. So today's first session is on artificial intelligence. But before we dive right into the topic, let me introduce myself as well as my guest for today. My name is Terrence, General Manager for AdMaker North America. And with me here is one of our senior curriculum developers, Tanya. Tanya, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thank you, Tarun. I'm Tanya. I'm an educational psychologist and I'm working with EdMaker as a curriculum developer. And I'm really excited for this webinar series as well because it's very interesting to see how technology plays a role in maker education and how we can make maker education accessible in remote settings as well with technology.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, it's exciting. It's a great it's going to be a challenge, but it's an exciting challenge for us to tackle. So without any further ado, let me just jump into this topic. Today's topic is a really exciting one, artificial intelligence. It's been taking the world by storm. And I mean, this session, this webinar isn't going to be an overview of artificial intelligence as a whole. We are going to focus on how you guys can use artificial intelligence in your classrooms for maker-centric learning. But I think no discussion of artificial intelligence can ignore the elephant in the room, that it's been changing the way we conduct our lessons, the way we learn and teach. And as teachers, I think one thing we realize is that you can use artificial intelligence to optimize your workflow, to improve your lesson plans, and to generate emails. Just last week, I had a conversation with a couple of teachers over at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where we were saying, what's the role of the teacher in the classroom in this case? When an AI can generate, better, as good, or even better lesson plans than you. How does that redefine the role of the teacher in the classroom? But there's also this very valid concern that if you can use AI to generate emails to reply your principal or your superintendent, your students can also use AI to generate assessments, generate responses to their assignments. So how do you grapple with this, right? And how do you set assignments that are AI proof? That's also something that a lot of people are talking about. A lot of educators and policymakers are really talking about. But I think all this is really important. All these are the important discussions that have to happen at the classroom, at the policy, at the administrative level. Um, but we need to understand that, a lot of this hype on AI is just surrounding large language models and ChatGPT, and there's so much else, right, within the realm of AI that goes beyond just a large language model. That's something that a lot of teachers and, dare I say, um, students might not even realize yet. Um, so today's focus is about how to introduce your students to AI using maker education principles. But before we dive into that, I think a question that we get often is, why do I need to introduce young learners to AI concepts? Doesn't it suffice for them to know that AI works and how to best make use of it? Do we really need to get our young learners to understand AI concepts like computer vision, natural language processing, technicalities of a large language model. And I would like to argue, and I think that the answer is a bit more nuanced than just a strict yes or no. But that's a pretty strong argument that exists to introduce our young learners to AI concepts. So number one, the future of work, right? So I think it's quite you know uh, universally accepted that AI is going to transform the way we work, but I think a lot of people underestimate just how much. So AI is predicted to create 2.3 million jobs by 2022. So that's 2.3 million according to research out there. And so understanding AI is actually going to be crucial for job preparedness to prepare your students for the future of work. So if you care at all about career planning, about getting your students to thrive in a world that where AI is going to be as fundamental as bread and butter, then this is something we should be thinking about. Number two, about critical thinking. I think as students explore the concepts of AI and how it's applied, they learn a lot about how to think critically about data, how to think critically about um, how things are analyzed. And I think a lot of these critical thinking are applied in other subjects too. It's just that AI is used as a content piece, AI is used as a topic for them to apply some of these critical thinking skills. And this will become a bit clearer later on where Tanya presents her segment. And the last bit, no less important, is about ethical implications. I think AI, like anything, is a tool, right? It can be used in a number of ways, both for the good of humanity and for the negative elements. And I think considering the ethical implications of AI requires an understanding of how AI works. And so understanding AI helps students grasp complex ethical topics like data privacy, algorithmic bias, and these are very real ethical implications that are going to manifest as AI gets more and more um, uh, universally used, right? So I think this is really just the tip of the iceberg, but these are just some very strong reasons why you should be introducing your young learners to AI concepts. The question is also not just why should I introduce my learners to AI, but how can I introduce them to the concepts of artificial intelligence in a way that is age appropriate. And this has a number of facets, right? Age appropriateness has to do with both the level of content we're pitching it to. So how sophisticated, how technical do we want to get into depends on the learner's age. And the other element of it is how deep do we want to get into the weeds with unpacking the ethical implications and things like that. So I think those things are where the role of the educator really shines in calibrating the lesson to the maturity and the age of the child. So artificial intelligence, like I mentioned, a lot of students may think that it's just about ChatGPT, it's just about large language models, but there's so much more to it. And unpacking all the different aspects of AI is going to take up more than the 1 hour that we have here. But for now, I like to leave it that, well, artificial intelligence involves things like computer vision, machine learning, building recommendation systems, and all of these different applications of AI, and I use the word applications in a very specific way. Um, all these different applications of AI can be transformed into lessons, into problem-based learning lessons for students to actually understand how AI can be applied to their daily lives, and in the process, also learn a little bit about math, science, the different subjects that they have in school. So I think without any further ado, I'm gonna hand the time over to Tanya, where she's gonna tell you about a lesson that she developed for Eddie, our um our professional development resource platform. And this lesson involves AI in a very novel, interesting way, and I hope that it's gonna be useful for some of you guys out there watching this video. Tanya, over to you.
Thank you, Terence. I really feel that, these are important issues to address, and we're trying to do that with Eddie. So I'll start now. I'll share my screen. Okay, so the lesson that we're looking at here is discovering language superpowers with NLP. And this lesson is going to be about how natural language processing can help us recommend movies. Basically, when you're watching Netflix, what Netflix does is it recommends movies based on certain genres. So I'll give you a quick overview of the lesson plan. So all of our lesson plans have multiple activities, an opening activity, a main activity, and a closing activity as well. Since this lesson is about natural language processing and the main activity, like I mentioned, is about creating a movie recommendation system based on moods. So let me start with what natural language processing is basically. So there are a couple of slides here, but I won't go through that. I'll tell you what natural language processing is. So it's like a special skill that teachers or, that basically teaches computers or machines how to interact with humans. So like we make sense of our language, how we talk to each other. Computers make sense of our words, sentences, and even emotions, which is very useful. So when you think about how chatbots talk to us, that's through natural language processing. And basically, we've tried to create a mini version of Netflix in our main activity here, where we're recommending movies based on moods. So for that, we're using a software called PictoBlocks. PictoBlocks uses block coding. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I've already downloaded PictoBlocks here and I've added the natural language processing extension. Basically, PictoBlocks is a software that will use block coding to help you develop a movie recommendation system. How to add extensions is basically on the bottom left of your screen. You can click and you'll find a lot of extensions over here. You can see there's computer vision, machine learning with teachable machine, and a lot of AI extensions that you can use for very interesting activities and to introduce your learners to AI. But we're focusing on natural language processing. So I've added this extension to my screen. And these are the blocks that I've used. So basically, I started with creating a block. How you can create a block is you click here and you can name a block whatever you want to. Since I've already named mine, I've used three genres here. So I've used action packed movies, I've used feel good movies, and I've used science fiction movies. Now, what I've done is I've thought of adjectives that come to my mind when I think about action packed movies. So I've added thrilled, adventurous, excited. Similarly, for feel good movies, I've added a couple adjectives, and for science fiction movies as well. Then, what I've done is I've created another block, which is a training block. Now, the training block is basically to train this machine. Since we're doing a movie recommendation, I've created a backdrop as well. Here, this is like a theater backdrop, and we've used a character. So, this is where you can choose a backdrop from, and this is where you can choose your characters from. So, we're using Toby, which is the main character of PictoBlocks, as the person that we're going to train here, as the machine that we're going to train here, rather. And these are the adjectives that I've used. Now, for the training block, I've used a reset text classifier block. Basically, the purpose of this block is to forget whatever the machine has learned previously and to start with a clean slate. And then I've used these genres. So basically, now in this block, my machine has already learned whatever adjectives I put. All of these adjectives are already within like the algorithm. And now I use a train text classifier block, which is how you train the machine. So these are the three things that I've used here. These are the three genres, and this is the training block that I've used. Now, this is the script, which is what you need to do with block coding. So block coding is basically, instead of using like Python or a very complicated script, you can use such visual blocks, which can make your machines do things when you place the blocks in the right place. So for this script, I've added the training block first, and then I've asked Toby to welcome everyone to the virtual theater. So if you go here, you can just drag a block and make the machine say anything that you would want it to say. Then you can ask, how do you feel? And then the machine will wait and then you will respond. Then I've added these three categories, which is the three genres here. I'll explain it when I give you the demo of how the machine works. So basically, I've added the three genres here. And then I've added some names of action packed movies, some names of feel good movies, and some names of science fiction movies. So I'll tell you how to do it. Since here is a when green flag clicked block, we click the green flag here. You can see Toby is welcoming everyone to the virtual theater. And it asks, how do you feel today? Terence, would you like to choose any of these adjectives here? The ones that we've used to train Toby?
Oh wow, what a selection. Okay, I like. Can I choose intrigued?
Okay. So let me type intrigued here.
Uh huh.
And okay.
Oh, is Toby sick?
Yeah, I think Toby's not working.
Toby's not feeling too well.
Yeah, I think this happens sometimes with PictoBlocks as it's in the process of, being improvised. I'll try again.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Maybe let's try another word like cheerful.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'll just stop sharing and start sharing again, and let's see if that works out.
Sure, let's do that. And I think this illustrates a really good kind of thing that teachers might face in a classroom, right? Like, despite your best intent and despite your best efforts, students are going to not get it right on the first try, even the second try or the third try. And even when they think they got it, they got the code written out perfectly. Um, the performance of the resultant kind of model is not going to act like what you intend it to be. So this is really part of the maker education process for like tinkering, figure out what doesn't work, and then how do you go back and like fix bugs and how to make things better. So I thought that was kind of nicely illustrated, even if we didn't actually plan for that.
Right. We can try with another adjective maybe so that we can see how it works. Maybe Toby's not feeling too intrigued to recommend science fiction movies. So,
Let's try cheerful.
okay. So you can see Toby is welcoming everyone to the virtual theater. And then, okay, cheerful. Like we are being cheerful despite Toby
Yeah,
not working out.
let's hope Toby's cheerful.
Okay. And okay, Toby.
Oh,
So it recommends feel good movies to feel even better. And then it goes on to recommend the feel good movies that have been used here. So you can do that with other adjectives as well. So, for instance, um, I can try using, let's say I try using thrilled here. And then Toby will recommend some action packed movies that have been already put into these blocks, like placed here. So, like Harry Potter, Chronicles of Narnia, or Jumanji. So, this is basically a very simple version of how a machine learning model works using natural language processing. And that's the demonstration of the lesson. So, these are the block codes. What I really like is you can paste your codes here and you can see it working right here. So, that's something that I really enjoy doing. Like, when you're making errors, you can fix it immediately. And this is something that is a lot of fun, not just for children, I feel for adults as well to do. Mhm. So that was the lesson. If there are any questions, we can talk about it.
Thanks so much, Tanya. I think that's a great illustration of, you know, um, how to bring AI over in a way that number one is age appropriate, number two is still linked to subjects, specific subject, and what's it called, standards alignment, and then number three also kind of illustrate certain maker education principles. So maybe I'll just start off with diving a little bit into um, what the standards and topics alignment of this particular lesson are. Like, how do you see a teacher using this in a classroom, and what kind of skills, academic skills, do you think it supports?
Mhm. So when you think about this lesson, you can think about a lot of adjectives that come to your mind to describe moods, right? So when you talk about being intrigued, it's the same as being curious, or even when you're perplexed, and when you want to be surprised. So these are some things that come to your mind. So one thing that you can definitely think about is using adjectives to describe your feelings and using synonyms as well of those words. So that is one thing that it really aligns with. Other than that, the whole idea of introducing coding at an early age, when you think about it, coding is such an overwhelming thing to uh, think about also. Like for me as well, for a person who's new to technology, uh, and to coding as well, I would say, using something as simple as block coding, it really gives me an idea of what coding is capable of doing, right? So these are the two things that I feel it academically aligns with the most.
Thanks, Tanya. How about the maker education? Like, how do you think this is kind of maker centric in a way? How do you think this whole experience like aligns with a lot of what we do in maker education?
Mhm. So maker education is basically, in my opinion, about learning by doing, right? If you
Mhm.
introduce a topic as complex as natural language processing to learners, and you just tell them what it is, like you just send them notes, or you present a teaching deck about what it is, then they might forget about it and they might not be curious to know. But with such activities, I think it's about learning what natural language processing can do. If they can build something that uses natural language processing, it's highly likely that they will understand it in detail. And that's what maker education is all about, right? When you actually have a very hands on experience of activities in terms of what you're going to do, and you understand along the way.
Right. And I think the idea of like along the way of exploring it, you're gonna make mistakes and you're gonna your initial results might not yield the kind of results that you want, but kind of going on and plugging away at it and trying to come up with something that's better than the previous iteration. I feel like that's also quite aligned to the maker at ethos. So I think yeah, that's a great response, and I love the way you kind of uh, connected the two things. Let's move from those to questions about. I had a question, right? When I was looking at it, I was really interested in how you came up with the lesson. Kind of, can you walk us through your thought process in terms of what kind of motivated you to do a lesson like this, and what kind of guided your that whole thought process?
Mhm. So the first thing is, like I mentioned, I believe that if we can contextualize something with an activity that is relevant or relatable for children, then it's something that they might be engaged with throughout. Like an activity like recommending movies. Movies is something that children are very fond of watching TV or watching movies. So if they have to develop a movie recommendation system, it's something that they will be engaged with throughout. They will think about movies that can come to their mind when they're talking about feeling good or feeling curious, I think. So this is what was the first thing that came to my mind. And also, it's very important, like you said, to teach the concept of prototyping and testing it at the same time. So I think that's the reason I chose pictoblocks, because it allows you to do both the things at the same time. And I remember one more thing that you mentioned earlier in the webinar is how the roles of the teachers are changing when it comes to artificial intelligence. And there are a lot of people who believe that teachers can be replaced with AI. But like we saw within the lesson, there was a problem. And when there is a problem, you wouldn't want AI to fix it. You wouldn't want a facilitator by your side, right, to guide you through the process, to tell you what maybe you're doing wrong. So, all the activities that we design, we keep in mind that the educators are front and center as well, other than the learners, which is, of course, the front and center of all education processes, and that's how it should be. But the educators need to feel like they're important parts of the system and they're facilitating the session as well. So these are the few things that we keep in mind, and these are the few considerations that we have in mind when we're building a lesson. But we also ensure that the lesson is extremely relatable and the activities are extremely engaging for the learners. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you talked about, the space to make mistakes, and especially how sure AI can kind of give you the response, the correct response. It can correct your answers like in a snap of my finger, right? But then is the learner really like gaining anything from that? Sure, they may know the right answer, but like if you're faced with a similar mistake in the future, can they generalize? Can they correct? Can they self-correct? I don't think so, right? So that's how the the importance of the coach or the facilitator within the room is something we still kind of like believe really strongly in.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk a little about, why you made certain design choices. So I found it quite interesting um, that we talk about, the different categories of movies. If you're feeling happy, if you're feeling intrigued. How did you like, what were some things you were thinking about in terms of chunking that out? Um, could Could a teacher possibly edit it to include more categories?
Definitely, the teacher can include more categories. Even the students can include more categories. So the idea here is to make technology very accessible. So, like I added those categories, it's very simple. You can just replicate those blocks and add more categories of movies. That was just a demonstration of a few genres that I could think of, and a few genres that you can see children watching. Like, children watch a lot of sci-fi movies, they're into a lot of adventurous movies. So even the movies that I picked for Toby to recommend were actually movies that children would enjoy watching and not movies that children would have never heard of. So these are small things that you need to take into consideration when you're preparing an activity like this, so that the children feel like they're a part of the process. So one interesting thing that the teachers could do is, when they're doing this activity, before starting this activity, they could ask the students to make a list of genres and then do movie wise, like, they could recommend some science fiction movies. So that would be such an interesting activity and like an icebreaker as well in the classroom, to recommend movies based on genres, and they can, even discuss among each other.
Mm. So thinking about how this activity, how you want to curate the learning experience, the lead up to this activity, and follow from that activity, because I think we see learning as a stream, right? So this is like one activity within the stream, and then what happens before, what happens after is going to be important to consolidate what the students are kind of learning about. Um, and I think that's a great reminder, right, to all of us that, when we're teaching about AI, it's always good to look at students' prior knowledge and look at where they can go on from there. Um, if I were a new teacher, kind of like implementing this in my classroom, what are some things I should look out for? What are some things I should bear in mind when I'm implementing this, purely from an operational or pedagogical point of view? What are some things I might want to take into consideration when implementing this?
Mhm. So, the first thing that you might want to take into consideration is going through the activity tutorial yourself to understand what it is about, since you might also be new to the tool. So, that is definitely one thing that you would look at. The other thing that you would want to look at is how to make it inclusive. So, for learners who find it difficult to read, PictoBlocks has a lot of options in terms of enabling voice as well, immersive readers as well. So, these are some things that you need to look out for, whether the technology that you're using is inclusive. Other than that, you can also look at, how you can make the process easier for your learners in terms of, okay, so for learners who don't understand how to drag these codes, maybe you can give them a pre-designed template of the codes and they can just put in the words there, because the idea is to teach them the concept, right? It's not about coding in the first place. Coding is just the cherry on the cake. But It's about teaching how a machine works. So basically, providing instructions is the idea. So if you could give the learners a pre-designed template, basically your idea should be to make sure that everyone is learning something from it, instead of just focusing on the activity itself. Just how to make it more inclusive is something that I would definitely want any teacher to think about.
Right. I love the answer about we are not teaching coding, right? And I think some people will raise their hands in shock and say, "How you're using picto blocks, you're using block coding, you're clearly teaching coding, right?" And I think what we're trying to say here, and what Tanya was, and correct me if I'm wrong or misinterpreting this, Tanya, but the idea is that while we're using a coding language, we're not teaching coding from scratch in a way
Right.
that's like step one, step two, step three. What we want to do is to give students code and then get them to understand if I adjust this variable, what's the result? If I adjust this variable, if I add this, what's the result? And I think that is fundamental to a lot of like computer science learning in the sense that um as teachers, you might not have time or the bandwidth to teach coding from the ground up, but also it may not be the best way to go about teaching coding, right? The way that we have tried to do it here is to give students kind of template code and get them to explore with it, get them to take out certain things, put in certain things, and then track their responses. And I think that's what we are trying to do with this lesson plan as well as the other lesson plans that we have. So
Mhm.
I guess to wrap up, where if teachers are interested in finding this lesson package, where can they locate it? Where do you think they can find it?
They can find it on the Eddie website. It's absolutely free, and you just have to create an account. It's not just this lesson plan. There are so many lesson plans which involve a lot of technology, complex technology that you can introduce in a simple manner, even boring topics that you can teach with a lot of excitement. So you just need to create an account on Eddie. It's free of cost, and you can find all the lesson plans. You can filter it according to the subject of your choice, according to the grades of your choice as well.
Yep. Thanks, Tanya. I think that's a great closing to end off. This is our first ever webinar session on using maker education and emerging technologies. Um, Join us next week for our discussion on, I believe it's simulation and modeling. Yeah. So next week we'll be exploring how we'll be taking a break from AI and looking at another realm of emerging technologies, namely simulation and modeling technologies, and look at how we can use these technologies in maker-centric ways in the classroom. This is Terrence, and with me is Tanya, and thank you so much for watching our webinar. Thank you.